Imagine being forced to marry a dead man just because of one stupid tradition. Imagine being forced to go into prostitution just to bear children for a dead man in the name of tradition. Dear viewers, let's enjoy this emotional story together. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to join this amazing community where we share interesting African tales. In the peaceful village of Nkalagu, nestled among the rolling hills of Ebonyi State, Afam and Kayamaka had grown up as neighbors. Their friendship blossomed naturally, from playing under the mango trees as children to eventually holding hands under the moonlight as teenagers. Over the years, the friendship had evolved into love, and by the time Afam turned 20, he had promised Kayamaka his heart, vowing to marry her and build a life together. Afam was tall, with a strength he'd inherited from years of working on his father's farm. He was known for his sense of humor, laughter that echoed across the fields, and his devotion to Kayamaka. She was equally admired in the village, with her beauty, kind heart, and an unmatched grace. Together, they were the couple everyone in the village rooted for, and their families supported their love. As the years went by, they began planning their future. Afam had saved a bit of money from selling produce at the village market, and Kayamaka had crafted a collection of beautiful woven fabrics she planned to sell. They were finally ready to make their union official. Both families gathered and started discussing the traditional marriage rites, the gifts that would be exchanged, and the ceremony that would be held in the village square. During one of these family meetings, Mama Nkechi, Afam's mother, pulled Kayamaka aside. She spoke to her with a warm smile, her wrinkled hands resting on the young woman's shoulder. "My daughter," she said, "I see the way Afam looks at you. He has chosen well. You will make a fine wife and a blessing to our family." Kayamaka, her cheeks flushed, bowed her head in respect. "Thank you, Mama Nkechi. I am blessed to have Afam, and I will honor him and this family." But as plans were being made, an unsettling rumor spread through Nkalagu. People whispered of a dispute between their village and a neighboring village across the Cross River state boundary. It was said that the villagers of Odukpani had claimed rights to a fertile piece of land that lay on the border of the two villages. Nkalagu's elders argued that the land had belonged to their ancestors for generations. As tensions grew, both villages prepared for a confrontation. When the village meeting was called, Afam attended alongside the other men. The elders, draped in traditional attire, addressed the villagers with grave expressions. They spoke of honor, of protecting their heritage, and the need to defend the land that had sustained their ancestors. "The land of our fathers must not be taken," declared one of the elders. "Our ancestors shed blood to protect this soil. We cannot stand idly by and let it be taken from us." The words stirred something in Afam. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of pride and a sense of duty to his people. That evening, he returned home with a decision burning in his heart. "I will go," Afam said, his voice firm as he spoke to Kayamaka and Mama Nkechi. "I will fight for our village." Mama Nkechi's face fell. "Afam, my son, this is not your battle to fight. We need you here alive and well. You are our future, my only son. What if you go and—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence, her eyes already brimming with tears. Kayamaka clutched his arm, her voice trembling. "Fam, please. We are so close to starting our life together. We've waited so long. Don't throw it away for a battle that may not even concern us directly. Let others fight." But Afam was resolute. "Kayamaka, I cannot sit back and watch as others defend what is ours. If I don't go, what kind of man would I be? I promise to protect you, and to protect this land is part of that promise." For days, Kayamaka tried to change his mind. She cooked his favorite meals, told him stories of their future, of the children they would have and the dreams they had yet to fulfill. But nothing could sway him. On the morning the warriors set out, the entire village gathered to see them off. Drums beat in rhythm as the men, dressed in traditional red and white war attire, prepared to leave. Afam stood tall among them, looking determined but also carrying a sense of sadness as he faced Kayamaka one last time. She clung to him, sobbing. "Fam, please come back to me. Promise me." Afam cupped her face in his hands. "I will come back, Kayamaka. I promise you. He kissed her gently, and as he turned away, she could see the resolve in his eyes. As the men marched toward the border, Kayamika watched them disappear down the dusty road. Her heart felt heavy, a weight she couldn't shake. All she could do was pray. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, a somber silence fell over the village. The warriors had yet to return. The villagers waited anxiously. Women gathered in small groups, whispering prayers, and men standing by their doors, peering into the fading light. Just as dusk turned to darkness, the faint sound of footsteps approached. A line of men, battered and weary, walked slowly into the village. The sight of them sent the villagers rushing forward, looking for their loved ones. But the warriors' faces were filled with sorrow. They carried bundles of broken spears, torn shields, and some bore the weight of bodies draped in cloth. The news hit like a thunderclap. 6 men had fallen in battle, including Afam. Kayamika screamed when she saw them lower Afam's body to the ground. She fell to her knees, clutching his lifeless hand, her cries echoing through the village. Maman Kechi was inconsolable, wailing as neighbors held her back from collapsing. He promised he would come back, Kayamika sobbed, clutching his hand. You promised me, Afam. You promised me. The village mourned the fallen, lighting torches in their honor, singing songs of valor for those who had given their lives. But for Kayamika, the world had gone silent. The man she had loved since childhood, the one she had dreamed of building a life with, was gone. Days turned into weeks, and as the mourning period ended, Kayamika found herself at a crossroads. Her future, once bright and filled with love, was now a void she didn't know how to fill. She tried to move on, to gather the pieces of her life. But Afam's family had other plans. Maman Kechi, stricken by grief, approached Kayamika's family with a startling request. She wanted Kayamika to marry Afam, even in death. The marriage, she argued, would honor his spirit and keep his legacy alive. But Kayamika refused. I agreed to marry him when he was alive, not now that he is gone. I loved him, but I cannot be a bride to a spirit, she said, her voice breaking. Maman Kechi's face hardened. This is not just about love, Kayamika. It's about duty. You were meant to be his wife. Even in death. He deserves your loyalty. Kayamika's family supported her decision, standing firm against the tradition, yet the tension between the families grew. But as Kayamika tried to move forward, strange things began to happen. She would hear footsteps following her at night, feel a cold presence as she walked down the village paths. In her dreams, Afam appeared, his face full of sadness, his voice urging, "You must marry me, Kayamika." As the months passed, she grew more and more unsettled, haunted by memories and the strange occurrences that refused to leave her in peace. One evening, the village crier made an announcement that shook everyone to their core. Any woman who had been in a relationship or engaged to a fallen warrior was now bound to marry his spirit, a decree that would bind them forever to the men who had died protecting their land. The village chiefs had made it law, and any woman who disobeyed would face the wrath of the fallen warrior spirits. Kayamika's heart sank. She knew she could not escape what lay ahead. Days after the decree was announced, Kayamika's world turned darker. She'd known hardship before. Loss, mourning, the weight of loneliness. But this was different. Her village, once filled with laughter and life, now felt like a prison. She couldn't escape the ominous shadow of the law, which now held her bound to a man who no longer walked the earth. Afam's memory lingered everywhere. In the fields where they used to walk, the tree they'd carved their initials into, even in the quiet moonlit nights when she'd whisper to herself, hoping he'd hear her somehow. The strange occurrences grew more intense. When she tried to walk outside at night, she'd hear footsteps shuffling just behind her, though no one was there. She'd catch glimpses of shadows and hear faint whispers in the wind. Her parents, concerned for her well-being, suggested she stay indoors more often, but nothing seemed to ward off Afam's spirit. One evening, as Kayamika sat alone in her small room, the sound of faint weeping reached her ears. She froze, her heart pounding. She was certain she was alone, but the sobs grew louder, filling the room. Trembling, she whispered, "Afam, is that you?" Why won't you let me go? In response, the sobbing stopped, replaced by silence that seemed to press down on her like a heavy weight. Then, as though carried on the wind, a voice filled her ears. It was unmistakably a fam's, filled with sorrow and frustration. You made a promise, Kayamaka, the voice echoed. A promise that even death cannot break. The next morning, Mom and Kechi visited Kayamaka's family again, urging them to reconsider the marriage. Our village has always honored its warriors, she said, her voice low but insistent. These men gave their lives for us. They deserve loyalty, even in death. Kayamaka's parents tried to reason with Mom and Kechi. You are grieving, Kechi, her father said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. We all are. But the living cannot wed the dead. It isn't natural. But Mom and Kechi's face hardened. If you refuse this marriage, Kayamaka may never find peace. A fam's spirit will haunt her, and the ancestors may turn their backs on your family. You don't know the power of these traditions. Despite the pleas, Kayamaka and her family refused to comply. She couldn't bear the thought of binding herself to someone she'd never see, touch, or hold again. It wasn't fair to her or to the memory of a fam. But that night things took a darker turn. Kayamaka tossed and turned in her sleep, plagued by disturbing dreams. In one, she found herself in a fog-covered field, the air thick and suffocating. Shadows moved all around her, whispering her name, beckoning her closer. She tried to run, but her feet felt like they were sinking into the ground. Then she saw him, a fam standing in the mist, his eyes empty and cold. Why do you run from me, Kayamaka? He asked, his voice echoing around her. I don't belong to you anymore, she replied, trying to steady her voice. You're gone, Afam. Let me go. But his face twisted with anger. If you won't be mine, no one else can have you. I will make sure of it. She woke up drenched in sweat, her body trembling. She tried to shake off the feeling, but the unease stayed with her. Days passed, and she found herself growing more paranoid. She could feel Afam's presence everywhere she went, watching, waiting. And soon, the effects began to spread beyond her dreams. Whenever a man approached her, even for simple conversation, something terrible would happen to him. Okoro, a kind young man who once offered her a ride on his bicycle, was found the next day with a broken leg. Another man, Emeka, had come to her parents, seeking her hand in marriage. He fell gravely ill the next day and couldn't leave his bed for weeks. The villagers began to talk, and rumors of a curse spread quickly. Even Kayamaka's parents grew fearful. Her mother suggested they consult a healer to see if there was a way to appease Afam's spirit. There must be another way, her mother whispered one evening as they huddled in the candlelight. Maybe there's a ritual that could set his spirit free. Kayamaka nodded, desperate to rid herself of the haunting presence that clung to her life like a dark cloud. The healer, a wise old woman named Neoma, was well known in the village for her knowledge of ancient customs and rituals. She listened patiently as Kayamaka described her experiences, nodding as though she'd expected this all along. The dead do not easily release those they feel bound to, Neoma said, her voice thick with a mix of compassion and firmness. But there is a ritual. It is difficult, and it will require great courage. Are you willing to do whatever it takes? Yes, Kayamaka replied, her voice steady. She was ready to do anything to free herself from Afam's spirit, even if it meant confronting him one last time. The night of the ritual was dark, with a chill in the air that sent shivers down her spine. Neoma had instructed her to bring a piece of Afam's clothing, something personal that would strengthen the bond between them in the ritual. She brought a shirt he'd left at her house once, back when they'd been planning their future together. In a secluded clearing outside the village, Neoma drew a circle in the dirt and placed a small fire at its center. Kayamaka knelt beside the fire, clutching the shirt as Neoma began chanting words in an ancient dialect, calling upon the spirits to sever the bond between Kayamaka and Afam. As the fire grew brighter, a cold wind blew through the clearing, and Kayamaka felt an overwhelming presence surrounding her. Afam's voice filled her ears, his tone anguished and filled with longing. Kayamaka, he called. Why are you doing this? She closed her eyes, her heart aching at the sound of his voice. "I can't live like this, Afam. I need peace." "Then be with me," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "You promised." Tears filled her eyes. "I promised to love you in life, Afam, not in death. We were meant to be together in this world, not the next." With one last look at the fire, Kayamaka threw his shirt into the flames, watching as it crackled and burned. The wind howled around them, and Afam's presence grew fainter, his voice filled with sorrow. "Goodbye, Kayamaka," he whispered. "I will always love you." As the flames died down, a strange calm settled over her. For the first time in months, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Afam's spirit had finally released her, but the village, still bound by the decree, had other expectations. The chiefs and elders believed that every woman who had lost a warrior husband must honor the law and perform a final, binding ritual. Kayamaka knew her struggle wasn't over. Kayamaka thought the ritual with Neoma had brought her freedom. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace and even dared to hope for a normal life. But this relief was short-lived. The village elders had made it clear: every maiden betrothed to a warrior lost in the war must fulfill the decree and marry the fallen warrior in a binding ritual. Refusal was seen as disrespect not only to the warriors but to the entire village, putting her family at risk of exile or curses from the spirits. In a final attempt to protect her family and avoid this forced union, Kayamaka and her parents visited the village chiefs. Her father pleaded with them, explaining how she'd been haunted, that Afam's spirit had finally been appeased. But Chief Obi, the head elder, shook his head solemnly. "It is not just about Afam's spirit, Kayamaka. This is a matter of honor for the entire village. Our warriors fought to protect us. For their sacrifice, they deserve our loyalty and respect." Kayamaka's heart sank. She was out of options. She would have to face the binding ceremony and become the wife of her dead beloved. She went to Neoma, the healer, hoping she might have some advice. "Why must they make me do this, Neoma?" Kayamaka asked, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "Haven't I suffered enough?" Neoma gave her a long, sympathetic look. "Traditions are powerful, my child. But sometimes they are like chains, binding us even when it makes no sense. The spirits of our ancestors linger when they are called upon, and the elders are afraid of losing their protection. But remember, your soul and spirit are your own, Kayamaka." With those words lingering in her mind, Kayamaka prepared for the binding ceremony. The day of the ceremony arrived, and the village gathered at the shrine of the ancestors, an ancient grove surrounded by tall trees. The elders performed rites, calling upon the spirits to bless the union and allow the souls of the fallen warriors to be honored. Though her mind fought against it, Kayamaka felt herself slipping into the reality of what was happening. She felt Afam's presence, hovering just beyond her sight, silent but watchful. As she knelt in front of the altar, adorned with Afam's favorite belongings and offerings, she felt a strange mix of sorrow and anger. The priestess placed a beaded necklace around her neck, binding her in spirit to Afam. Kayamaka felt a chill pass over her as if Afam's hand was resting on her shoulder. "It is done," the priestess declared. "The union is sealed." The crowd dispersed, whispering and watching her. She was now a widow before even becoming a wife, a ghost's bride. After the ceremony, Kayamaka found herself confined to the role of Afam's widow. She moved in with Momonkechi, as tradition dictated, expected to honor her husband by caring for his mother and fulfilling duties that made her both part of the family and a reminder of the village's loss. For months, Kayamaka kept her distance from everyone, consumed by the ghost of her unfulfilled dreams. Her youth, meant for laughter and joy, was now overshadowed by a future tied to a spirit. The whispers and pitying looks from other villagers made her feel more isolated. And Afam's presence, though no longer tormenting her, still lingered, a silent witness to her life. One evening, Momonkechi suggested that Kayamaka consider bearing children in Afam's honor. "You are young, and he would have wanted children," Momonkechi reasoned, her voice filled with quiet desperation. "His spirit would be honored through them." Kayamaka froze. The thought of having children for a femme seemed unbearable, but her words caught in her throat. In the eyes of the village, it was an expectation she couldn't escape. As the months passed, men from the village approached her, each one ready to help her fulfill the role of a mother. But every time a man tried to form a relationship with her, strange events would occur. They would fall ill, lose interest, or face accidents, as though some invisible force were keeping them at bay. It became clear that a femme's spirit wasn't willing to let go, even if it meant blocking her from moving on with her life. Feeling trapped, Kayamika realized she had only one way to escape her fate. She had to perform a final ritual to break the bond completely, to sever herself from the lingering hold a femme's spirit had on her. One night, she sneaked into the forest where the ancient shrine stood. She came alone, bringing nothing but the necklace from the binding ceremony. Standing under the light of the moon, she took a deep breath and called out to a femme, if you truly loved me, set me free. I am tired of being bound to a memory, a ghost." The forest was silent. No whispers, no shadows, just the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Kayamika held her breath, waiting, hoping. Finally, she took the necklace and buried it beneath a tree, covering it with earth. As she stepped back, a feeling of peace washed over her, a gentle release that she hadn't felt in months. She knew in her heart that a femme had heard her and finally understood. Kayamika returned to the village, knowing she could finally move on. She no longer felt a femme's presence, and for the first time since his death, she felt light, free from the weight of her past. As the years passed, she remained in the village, choosing a quiet life away from the expectations of others. Though she never married or had children, she found purpose in helping other women, supporting them through their struggles and losses. In her own way, she honored a femme's memory, not as a ghost, but as a cherished part of her past. And with time, the village let go of its rigid traditions, understanding that love and loss cannot be bound by customs alone.